Hi students of a Perusable Feast. This course has ended and here I am making a video. I realized that I thought perhaps that a video on decision making in one's writing, which is the topic for week 6, is more of a sort of personal interrogation that you do on your own. And so what could I say in a video about decision making as a writer that perhaps you couldn't come to naturally as you sort of interrogate the nature of your own work? And then I sort of thought, well, perhaps there's a few things I could say about what it means to make decisions as a writer, both on the page and off, and the ways in which we speak about our own writing, either to others or in applications, submitting to journals, residencies, programs, college, what have you. And so I'm just going to offer a little bit of my own wisdom in that regard in this video. So the premise of decision making in last week's module is about knowing exactly what you're doing in your work, maybe as you do it, but certainly after. For me, as a poet, decision making in the act of writing is not something I consciously do. I'm a big believer in letting the work unfold in real time, in beginning a piece, and as you move through it with a sense of disorientation or unsureness in the beginning. The piece itself, when I write, teaches me how it wishes to proceed and perhaps when it's ready to end. And so decision making in the act of writing is not something I'm doing in my front brain, in a sort of conscious way. And to me, that's really the beauty of writing, is that you sort of forfeit the ego, forfeit the control center, the control mechanism, and you have that sort of artistic creative space to release, to work through, to imagine, to play, and that's what I like. That being said, after the writing is done, one poem, one essay, it's difficult to see what decisions ought to be made in terms of sending it out to publishers, crafting a larger body of work like a book or a chapbook. And so for me, the workshop component, like we've had here, and like other programs offer, like many colleges offer, online programs offer, is useful. Hearing how others see your work unfolding, see the themes in the work, see their interpretations versus your intention. And intentionality and decision making go hand in hand, right? And so navigating your relationship to intentionality in your work is crucial. If you're a fiction writer, if you're writing personal essays, nonfiction essays, there's certainly a component of intentionality, right? You have an idea for a piece, you have perhaps a plot, characters, a mood, a scene, a place, and you decisively craft a world around whatever that initial impetus is. And so you may have more of an available language to talk about your work after you write it, which is good. I have spoken to a number of you about applying to other creative writing programs or the Young Writer Studio Summer Program, and how we might go about crafting a personal essay for another program. And in my opinion, if I'm reading your application to be admitted to one of these programs, a student that can sort of precisely talk about the nature of their work, what they want it to do, themes they explore, craft-based devices, syntax, imagery, all the things we've been talking about in this class. If a writer is able to conceptualize what's going on in their own work, either in terms of its craft-based mechanisms or a larger historical, literary, political context, emotional context even, that to me indicates that the writer has a level of lucidity and clarity in terms of not only their own work, but perhaps the way they'll be able to talk about the work of others in a workshop setting. All of this to say, decision making is less to me, pertinent in terms of the act of writing itself, which can be deliberate, can be sort of, stream of consciousness, or totally absent of control. But decision making is a crucial component in terms of the way we decipher our own work, the way we experience it, the way we undergo it, the way we analyze it. And so to me, the best way to sort of be a deft and precise reader of your own work and the work of others is to read substantially, read a lot of different kinds of work in your genre, outside of your genre, and to have conversations with people about poetry in general, fiction in general, and develop that vocabulary to speak in a way that you feel does the work justice, whether it's your own work or the work of others. And so also another thing to think about in terms of decision making, if we're doing like a bullet point list here, this would be a separate bullet point, is there are sort of moral and ethical components to the ways in which we write. I think, when you begin writing, you're at the beginning of your sort of creative writing journey, you have to write the work that feels urgent to you, the work that feels like you can write it, right? And perhaps that work is about yourself. Perhaps it's about the way in which you see the world. Perhaps it's narratives that sort of project onto our own wishes, our own ideals, or grief or violence that has happened to us, or that we're fearful of. There's a whole spectrum of what feels necessary to write when we begin writing. As we move forward in our process, though, and perhaps when we feel less of that sense of compulsion, that sense that we know exactly what must be written, then we can start making those decisions, making choices about the types of work that we desire to write, even if it doesn't feel available to us. Is it important to write about one's interiority? Is it important to write about oneself, understanding one's body, understanding one's dreams, understanding the way we interact with people? Or do we move beyond the self? Can we consider a world in which we're not the main focus? A world in which, the small tragedies of our own lives, or the small pleasures and joys of our own lives, are not a central focus. There's an immense amount of interiority that must go into that as well. But being decisive in a world that may feel chaotic or unknowable to you, and writing into that as well as writing into yourself, there's a balance, right? You just make decisions about what feels urgent to you, what feels writable, and pushing yourself beyond that as well when you have the sort of the motivation and the agency to do so. And then there's a million other kinds of decision making components out there to writing or publishing. Thinking about publishing in what kinds of spaces. Would you want your work to exist on a large scale platform that would have lots and lots of readers, but you may lose an element of control in the way your book or your chapbook or your poem or your essay or fiction is marketed? Would you rather be with a smaller independent press or journal that has, perhaps values that are that align with your own, would give you creative agency in terms of the marketing of your text? There's all kinds of decisions to make, and though they are at once personal, they're also sort of every decision in a way is political. The ways in which we align ourselves with our art and our art's entrance into the world. All interesting things to think about in terms of decision making. But for now, I would say, as you begin your writing journeys, focus on the process of entering text onto the page itself, and the ways in which it will kind of tell you what to do. Decisions don't necessarily have to be consciously made. There's immense freedom in simply abstaining from being decisive. We have to make so many decisions in our lives anyway. Why not let the art sort of work through us rather than against our impulses? I don't know. That's how I feel. That's my 2 cents on making decisions in writerly work, in any kind of artistic work. And in terms of wrapping up this course, I just want to say that I've had such a wonderful time working with you. You all have been so communicative and just a joy to work with. I've met with many of you in terms of thinking about, or emailed with you in terms of thinking about future writers that you might want to read, journals you want to submit to if you're at that point in your writing journey, summer programs that you may think about beyond the Young Writers Studio online, as well as thinking about just your future in general in a sort of writerly way. How do you want to sustain this creative practice that's lifelong and can be so joyful at any stage? Yeah, and so final thoughts. I'm working hard at completing all of the grading. It takes time because I try to provide good feedback for you. You should expect that every single thing will be graded by the end of this week. And then next week, that will give you a window to look through everything, make sure your grades are where you want them to be before I submit them to the studio itself, and you will get your certificate. It seems at this point everyone's going to get their certificate, which I'm really happy about. Hopefully that makes you feel like you accomplished something. But remember that it's not the destination, it's the journey, as those trite little frames and pictures say at, dentist's office or TJ Maxx or whatever. But it's true, the sort of process of going through the class and writing more and getting feedback is way more important than any kind of certificate. Though of course you'll want that certificate too, certainly. As always, if you need anything in the future, if you just want to update me with the process of your work, have any questions about future things, past things, present things, any things really related to writing, I'm here for you. I love keeping these, student mentor, mentee mentor relationships intact. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of your writing life. Keep reading, keep writing, and thanks again.